Now, so far we've seen equations where you get things like x equals 2 or x equals 3, but sometimes there's cases where you don't have a solution because there's no number for x that'll work to balance your equation on both sides, or sometimes every number in the world will work to keep your equation balanced on both sides. So let's look at some examples together before you try one or two on your own. So 3 times the quantity x plus 4 equals 3x plus 11. First, I want to distribute the 3 on the left side of the equation. So 3 times x is 3x, 3 times 4 is 12. So I get 3x plus 12 equals 3x plus 11. Now to get my variables together on one side, I'm going to subtract 3x on this side and do the same on the other side, leaving me on the left side with 12 because this 3x and minus 3x cancel out, but then the same thing happens on this side. So I get 12 equals 11. Well, 12 does not equal 11. That is not a true statement. And so I have no solution because there's no number in the world that I can substitute in for x that will keep my variables, or that'll keep my equations balanced, because here I'm multiplying by 3 and adding 12, and if I plug in a number here, I multiply by 3 and add 11, so obviously nothing will work to make that true. Let's look at another example. Negative 2 times the quantity x plus 3 equals negative 2x minus 6. Again, we'll distribute first, giving me negative 2x minus 6 equals negative 2x minus 6. You can probably already see that both expressions are exactly the same. Negative 2x minus 6 on this side and negative 2x minus 6 on this side. So obviously, no matter what number I substitute in for x, it's going to be multiplied by negative 2 and then subtracted by 6. So it's always going to work itself out. Because, and you can see it when you solve, if you add 2x on both sides, you end up with negative 6 equals negative 6. And in this case, you would say infinite solutions, because every number in the world, no matter what you plug in for x, you will get a balanced equation. Why don't you try one on your own now? X plus 2x plus 1 equals 3x plus 2 plus 3. So pause the video, try this out yourself first. So what you should do here is first combine like terms. On both sides of my equations, I can simplify. So x plus 2x, I get 3x on the left side plus 1 equals, and then 2 plus 3 are both integers I can combine on the other side. So I get 3x plus 5. Now I'm going to subtract 3x from the left side, and if I do that on the left side of my equation, I also have to do that on the right side of my equation, and the 3x minus 3x cancel out here, and 3x minus 3x also cancel out on the right side. I'm left with 1 equals 5. So in this case, I would say, well, what does x equal? Well, nothing's really ever going to work to make this true, so I would say no solution. Okay, let's move on to some word problems. Another favorite. Okay, so if you want to shorten this when you're writing this down, you can. Otherwise, just take a minute so you have it and copy the problem down. Let me read it aloud. Sarah buys shoes online for $32 a pair, including tax. Shipping is $4. If she decides to purchase more shoes, but there's no added shipping costs, how many can she purchase with $100? So let's assign some variables here. And the first thing I can say is Sarah is going to buy X pairs of shoes, and each pair is $32, so we can write that as a product. $32 per pair of shoes, so I can write 32x. Then we also have to include the $4 shipping that she has to pay, so 32 times the number of shoes plus the $4 she'll have to pay, and this needs to total $100 because that's all the money she has. So as an equation, 32x plus 4 equals 100. Now you can subtract 4 on both sides, and we end up with 32x equals 96. Divide by 32 on both sides, and we see that x equals 3. And in this case, x is the number of shoes, so she can buy 3 pairs of shoes. Okay, now you're going to try one on your own. I'll read it aloud. Again, you can shorten it if you need to. And then you can pause the video before we go over it. Your sister can get $30 per day for selling clothes at the market, but she has to pay $60 at first for renting a stand. You can get $20 per day for helping your neighbor rake lawns. After how many days will your sister earn as much as you? Try to write an equation, and then let's solve it to see how many days it would take for you and your sister to have the same amount of money. Okay, so let's start with your sister first. She can get $30 per day. So X is the amount of days here. But then she has to pay $60 out of pocket for the rental. So that's the $60 she's actually losing. And then you get $20 a day for raking the lawns. And now, since we want your sister and you to have the same amount of money, and we want to know how many days that takes, we can put an equal sign because we want your sister to have the same amount, so equals what you have here. Now remember, we want to bring our variables to one side, so I'm going to subtract 30x from this side to bring it over and do the same thing on this side. So 30x minus 30x, that cancels out, and then 20x minus 30x, so I get negative 60 equals negative 10x, because 20x minus 30x is negative 10x. Now I can divide by negative 10 on both sides to get x by itself. Negative 10 divided by negative 10, that cancels out, and negative 60 divided by 10 is positive 6. So 6 equals x, and here we were talking about the number of days. So it takes 6 days for your sister to have as much money as you. Okay? Okay. And finally, we're going to solve an equation for a variable inside of a formula. And this is when you don't necessarily get a number answer, so you don't get something like x equals 5 or w equals 2. You have a formula solved for a different part of the formula. So let's go over example 1. Solve a equals b times h for b. So right now I have a by itself, and area equals base times height. This is the formula for the area of a parallelogram, actually. But I want to get b by itself. So in order to get b by itself, right now b is being multiplied by h. So what I can do on both sides is divide by h, and that'll cancel it out on the right side. Do the same thing to the left side, and this way I get b by itself. So I see that a over h equals b. Now let's look at another example. Solve q equals the quantity c plus d over 2 for d. So I want to get d up here by itself. So rule number 1, and you can take note on this, is you can never just jump straight to the numerator. The first thing you have to do is cancel out the denominator. So we have to get rid of the divided by 2. So in order to cancel out dividing by 2, I'm going to multiply by 2 on both sides. So if I divide by 2 and then I multiply by 2, that cancels out. I have to do the same thing to the other side. So 2 times q is 2q. And now I have 2q equals c plus d, because we canceled out the dividing by 2. Now to get d by itself, I have to subtract c on both sides. So I get 2q minus c equals d. And since that's what I wanted to isolate, I'm done. I have d equals 2q minus c. Now how about you try one? And you can pause the video to see how you do first before we go over it. Okay, so solve p equals 2l plus 2w for w. Okay, so the first thing you should do is subtract 2l on both sides. So subtract 2l here and subtract 2l here, leaving you with p minus 2l equals 2w. Now, to get w by itself, I want to divide by 2 because right now w is being multiplied by 2. So if I divide by 2 on both sides, and I'll show you what this looks like. You want to divide this side by 2, and then you want to divide this side by 2, but because there's more than one term here, you want to divide the whole side by 2. So right here, this cancels out, and your final answer is p minus 2l, all divided by 2, equals w. And I know that looks funny, but actually you're done. And one final problem for today. We have an equation, E equals mc squared, and we want to get m by itself. Actually, just kidding. We want to get c by itself, is what I should have said. Okay? So to get c by itself, you first want to divide by m on both sides because this is m times c squared. Okay, there's no such thing as mc, that means m times c. So let's divide by m on both sides. So if you do that, you end up with e divided by m equals c squared. Now I don't know if you remember Pythagorean theorem, but I want to get c by itself, and right now c is being squared. The opposite of squaring something is taking the square root. So if we take the square root on this side, the square root and the square cancel themselves out, so you're just left with c, but you have to do the same thing to the other side, and so your final answer is the square root of e over m equals c. Now you're going to try some problems on your own to see how you do, and when we meet, we can go over any questions you had.